That was a legally required notice that we are um, recording these sessions. My lawyers, my legal team insists that I let you guys know. So nice to be here with you all. Happy Saturday, as people sometimes say. Really happy to have a chance to reconnect and just to take some opportunity in our week to hopefully get a little bit of a peace of mind break, a bit of an oasis, perhaps, if we're busy running around dealing with a lot of the details in our life, to think about some of these bigger underlying questions about how to find peace of mind and meaning and so forth in our life. So what I do in these sessions is always we begin with a bit of meditation and then go into a topical, a talk on a particular topic, and then end with a bit of meditation, typically on that topic. So the reason we begin with the meditation is really just to reset, because there's so much clutter often happening in our mind. It's like on our computer having all these browser tabs and windows open and applications. Everything gets a bit cluttered and a bit hard to figure out what to focus on. So now every once in a while, you just got to clean everything out and start fresh. Okay, what are we going to do now? And that's our question here. So when we're meditating, it's helpful. We just begin with finding a comfortable position. I'll often stretch my neck a little bit, stretch my shoulders, just make sure I'm feeling comfortable. There is an interplay between our body and our mind, and that is deep and goes at many levels. But sometimes when our body is made more relaxed, our mind feels better. When our mind's made more relaxed, our body feels better, and so forth. And then we just take a deep breath in and out. Again, just resetting. Then another deep breath in and out, inviting ourselves to relax. Then another breath and just ask ourselves, what is important right now? And we become aware of our surroundings, the room we're in, the temperature, lighting, where we're sitting, how our body feels. Where do we feel comfortable or uncomfortable? And then we just let in all of the feelings and sensations from our body. We just become aware of the feelings in our body. We may have been ignoring the sense of our body, but we just try to feel, what are the feelings throughout our body? And we can notice as we breathe, the feelings inside our body may change slightly. We feel the breath. We feel how the breath changes the sensations. The feelings inside our body are always happening right now. They're very different from the concepts and stories in our head. The feelings in our body are always immediate in this present moment. Constant flow of information, including the experience of change as we breathe in and out. When our attention moves away, it's like we've changed the channel on what's coming into our consciousness, but we just change the channel back to what's happening in our body. Every time that channel changes to something else, some other story, some distraction, we just change the channel back to paying attention to our body. And then we can think in the short period of time we have here together, our mind will necessarily change. Our life will change. It's always changing. Every action changes us. What would be the best direction that our life could possibly go in as a result of this brief time this morning? Just think about that. What direction would we like to move our life in? And then with that intention, we can open our eyes and arise from this meditation. Okay. So, meditation, it has, it still has a good reputation. It has a good reputation in modern society. It was a bit more fringe, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but it's still has a nice, good reputation. But people often think of meditation as something that's maybe a bit hard to do, or a bit rare or distant, or something that other people do, or maybe you feel like you meditate, but most of the people around you maybe not interested. But the meditation that we just did, for example, becoming aware of our body, I like to think of it as like picking up a weak signal, and I hinted at the analogy of a channel, back to the old days where you'd have your TV channel and you turn the knob, but it's similar idea, right? These days we're not really using radios and TV antennas so much, but I think we still probably get the idea of weak signals versus strong signals. So a lot of the signals that we get in our world are strong signals, right? I'm hungry. I haven't had breakfast. That's a strong signal. I'm getting a strong signal from my belly. It's like, go eat, right? And then I go to the cabinet or a fridge, and I look at the food that I've got available, and I try to pick up, where am I getting the strongest signal, right? Is it a croissant? Is it a piece of fruit? Is it, something with peanut butter? Is it, and then it's interesting. We do that all the time, in a sense. We're always picking up signals. Like, we go to a group of people, for example, now I'm talking to you and I'm trying to pick up this signal. Like, are these people interested? Are they bored? They keep coming back. That's probably a good sign, but we're always trying to pick up these signals. You go to a group of people. Do they like me? Do they not like me? Am I doing a good job at work? Am I not doing a good job? My boss just said something. Are they hinting that they hate me? Like, we're always trying to pick up these little signals, these weak signals. And so some weak signals are incredibly important. Like, if you go to the doctor, right, and they give you a blood test, and the blood test comes back and says, oh, this is a little, your cholesterol is a bit high. That's a very, very weak signal for us as humans. I would never know if my cholesterol was high, right? And that's where we have specialists, scientists, doctors, and so forth, trying to help us to identify, find these weak signals and amplify them. They do a blood test, cholesterol comes back high, they show you the number, they highlight it, and they have a conversation with you about it. So they're amplifying that weak signal. They're saying, oh, look at this cholesterol. Let's talk about diet. Stay away from the croissants, have more fruit. So stay away from the peanut butters and the croissants, stick with the fruit. So, a lot of, I keep being surprised year after year how hard it is to navigate being a human, like really elegantly, like doing a really elegant job of being us. Takes skill, right? It takes skill to be you. I'm extraordinarily impressed with how well you all have done being you for so long now. Because it's hard, and we're having to learn all the time. We're having to learn about, what are the signals about what's going right, what's going wrong, how do we increase things, and how do we build helpful habits? Because what happens is these habits of like hunger, or the habits of my craving a croissant, those are strong signals, and they're strong signals because of genetics. That's one of the factors. We're programmed to like fat and sweets and so forth. And there's strong factors also because of habits, and there's strong factors also because of advertising. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but we need to change our mind, right? And that's a lot of what enables us to be more successful, is changing, like listening to the weak signals and strengthening habits. Now, one of the weakest signals of all is the feeling that comes in from our body on an ongoing basis. The body's always there. It would but often, at least for me, because I'm a little bit cerebral, but I often feel like I'm just kind of ahead, and there happens to be a body that's being dragged around behind me. Like, there's a body that goes places, and I have to move it around to get places. But mostly I'm like very conceptual, and so going here, going there. So we're dragging this body around with us, but we're not often listening to what it's saying until it hurts us, until there's pain or a real feeling of pleasure. Those are strong signals, right? So when we're meditating, though, what we're doing, we're trying to pick up these weak signals from inside our body, these little whispers, right? And now people often talk about meditating on the breath. But meditating on the breath is actually, it's meditating on the body. It's just the breath is the strongest of all the weak signals in the body. Like if you pay attention to your body, it's a weak signal, but the strongest of them all is, we're breathing, there's in and out, it's a little cooler, a little warmer, but they're all pretty weak signals, right? But what's happening is that our body can tell us a lot, and it can tell us a lot about our emotional state. And one of the things we do a meditation in this class at the beginning, we do one at the end. And I'm always surprised, right? Because I get pretty relaxed and peaceful in the beginning, and then I start talking and so forth. And by the time we get to the end, the last meditation, and I'm like, okay, start with a deep breath. It always feels like, yeah, right. Okay, I do need to relax again. Like there's some tension that builds up just naturally, right? Even in a short period of time, in a non-threatening situation. At least I'm trying to keep this a non-threatening situation. There's this tension that builds up naturally, right? There's a little bit of, there can be tightness that builds up naturally, some discomfort, distraction, etc. And so meditation is just an activity of, like I use that analogy, changing the channel back to paying attention to the body, partly because it can tell us a lot about our emotional state, stress and fear being the principal ones. And stress and fear are incredibly fundamental, to how we operate, humans and animals. Animals experience fear. Every single animal experiences fear. And humans, we experience fear. But our fears, a lot of them are conceptual, right? They're driven by what we're seeing on the news, and worries about work and worries about abstract things. And so if you look at the news is very strong signals, right? Like really incredibly dramatic. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw the latest news, the world is about to end. I don't know if you checked already, but it's always variations on disaster, right? And there is part of our mind that is naturally attracted to these strong signals. And so news has a bit of an addictive quality. Social media has a bit of an addictive quality. TV, there's a lot of things with an addictive quality, and they're all information sources. It's interesting. Information gets kind of addictive. Because we're interested in these strong signals like, oh, danger, fear. One of the reasons why people think of meditation as hard is because it remains such a weak signal, and it's giving For the most part, meditation and our body give a fairly boring message, which is that we're still here, we're still alive. And interestingly, that's a boring message, but that is exactly the right message that we need a lot of the time. Like if you're looking at the news and you've got some anxiety arising, and, oh no, a friend of mine here in San Diego, he said, I look at the news and it's all like doom and gloom and disaster and the world's about to end and so forth. But I come outside and, there's birds and there's flowers and sunny day and, it's not that bad. We have a little bit of an unfair advantage being in San Diego, but still it's not that bad. Even if it's cold, right? It still can be beautiful. And so looking at our bodies a little bit like looking at nature, or listening to our body, becoming aware of our body is a little bit like looking at nature. It's boring, right? There's not that much going on. It's kind of quiet. It's going about its business. There's a bit of light, but there's a bit of life there. There's a bit of life energy there, right? When you go out in nature, you see the trees, there's the smells, there's some, the moisture in the forest, in the air, there's some humidity and oxygen and animals. And so there's a bit of a life force, right? And that life force is just kind of quietly going about its business. And it's, there's dramatic things in nature as well, but most of nature is just very boring. It's just kind of going about its thing. And it's the same with our body. There might be painful bits or really pleasant bits, but most of what's going on in your body is just really boring, right? But there's a bit of a life force there. And that's also what our breath is signaling, right? This life force. There's because even if you don't try, your body just wants to live. If you try to stop breathing, just with your intention, your body will kind of gasp, and there's a bit of your body wants to live, right? Whatever's going on up here, set that aside for the moment. Terrible visualization, right? But the body itself wants to live. It's got its own intelligence. It's got its own wish to sort of survive and thrive and be healthy. And it's you've got your metabolism going. There's a whole world going on in here, whole world going on inside the body that we're normally ignoring. And the underlying message is actually not that bad. In fact, the more we begin to become aware of our body, the more it becomes just very peaceful, like a sense of well-being, where all of the drama outside becomes more and more superfluous, and the weak signals become enhanced. And that's what happens when you focus on something, a little weak signal, it becomes enhanced. And that's where somebody who's an expert in something, they can, if somebody's an expert in flowers, they see a little spot here on a flower or plant, and they think, oh, there's some disease coming. And their mind can amplify a weak signal, and our mind can amplify a weak signal by paying attention to it. But the signal that's coming from our body is actually not just we're okay, but the more we focus on it, lots of things happen. One is that in the feelings inside our body, there's not so much of a sense of here and there. Normally, when we're looking visually at things, there's very much a sense of I'm here and you're there. There's a distance, there's a space, there's a gap. But from the body's point of view, the body doesn't have a gap. There is no gap between the body and what it's sensing, because it's like if there's a tingling in my hand, where is that tingling? It's exactly where the hand is. And there's no gap. And that may sound a little abstract and strange, but what happens with our visual processing is we tend to always think there's a gap there. And we tend, because 30% of our brains are visual, right? So there's a strong tendency when we imagine things and think about things to think about gaps and distance and space. And one of the big gaps and distances in space that we have is the gap between ourselves and other people. So last week I was talking about having difficult conversations, and Eileen and I had chatted. She was gearing up for a difficult conversation. I was gearing up for a difficult conversation. And both of us survived our difficult conversation. We had a chance to check in beforehand. So, but But one of the things that kept coming up for me is I actually had a friend sort of help, like I spent hours just talking through like, okay, how should I present this? Because it was really something big on my mind for a couple of years. And the conversation went great, but it went great partly because I had de-escalated the conflict between myself and this person, and again and again and again came to see things from their point of view and found a more moderate, balanced position. And although I probably have had, everybody thinks they're above average, but I probably have spent an above average amount of time thinking about how to not be in conflict with other people. Still, when I was running through this conversation in my head, it was very conflictual. And it always ended up with me like telling them, what a bad job they were doing. And then every time I rehearsed the conversation in my head, it never came out well. So I knew I wasn't quite ready to go into that conversation, which is why I got my friend to sort of talk through it quite a lot, because I knew that it was not going to go well if our egos got involved, right? And if it's like two mountain, bighorn rocky, what are they called? Bighorn sheep, butting heads, and like, you ever had those conversations? And what's the net result? Compromise rams. Yeah, compromise, not compromise. No, headaches. Everybody gets a headache. Everybody gets a headache when you have a conversation like that. So I don't need any more headaches. They don't need any more headaches. No, none of us probably need any more headaches. What we need is dialogue, right? What we need is dialogue. And the interesting thing about dialogue is dialogue means two points of view coming together and kind of mixing, and that separation or the gap between two people closing and mixing and sort of coming to shared ideas, even if you don't fully agree. Like, I've got disagreements with some of my own opinions. I've got contradictory opinions in my own mind. I've got, I should exercise more. I don't want to spend time exercising. Those are both legitimate, those are both legitimate points of view. It's an ongoing debate. So just because there's two conflicting points of view doesn't mean that they can't peacefully coexist. Those two wishes, the wish to exercise more and the wish to not spend more time exercising, peacefully coexist in my mind. And they sort of, they sort of go back and forth a little bit, and they find some balance, and we manage to get it to work. And so that's why they say, even in an organization, diversity is good, right? Differences of opinions and different points of view, that diversity is good. It finds some balance. We should do more of this. No, we should do more of this. Okay, we'll find some balance. But when we have a conversation that's like rams butting heads, that's not dialogue. That's not balance. That's just a headache, right? So dialogue means you close the gap between yourself and another person, close the gap between their point of view and your point of view. And in that space, new insights can arise, and it's better for everybody. And but what was interesting to me leading up to this difficult discussion was how much my mind kept being attracted to conflict. And it's like this perverse attraction to conflict. And I'm just thinking, like, why was that? I know better 100 times over, right? But why this perverse attraction to conflict? And I was thinking, it's about power, and it's about having a sense of certainty. Like, if I could come up with just the right rebuttal, if I could come up with just the right words to stop them in their tracks and say, okay, now I've got you, then my fantasy is I'll subdue them and I will be victorious and my point of view will win and dominate. And there's a comfort there, right? Because it takes away that uncertainty. It takes away that it takes away the fear, right, that somebody else has power over us or would take things in a wrong direction. And so it's addictive. There's kind of this addiction to the power of like winning in an argument, or addiction to the power of like knowing everything and being smarter than other people, or being pushier than other people, or whatever. There's a bit of an attachment in our minds to that. It's similar to our attachment to foods, right? It's a strong signal. Like I'll have a discussion and I'll show them how, much more right I am than they are, right? That's a very delicious, attractive kind of food that we want that, and our mind keeps coming back to that, but it's not a healthy food. Or it can be okay, but, in moderate portions. And what's a healthier food, right, is dialogue. Dialogue is a much healthier, more natural, more sustainable food. And it's like in nature, right? There's some ecosystem, right? There's some balance, there's so one of the things that happens when we meditate, we turn our attention to that which is boring, that which is this weak signal inside our body. But we come to begin to get some taste for and some appreciation for how actually delicious. There's a bit of a refined enjoyment to the pleasure that comes from a peaceful body. There's a bit of a refined enjoyment. So like eating, this didn't mean to, this, I'm not trying to make this an advertisement for what you should eat or not, but it's just such a common analogy that everybody understands it, right? If you eat a piece of fruit or vegetable because your doctor told you to, right? Eventually you get a taste for it, right? There's a natural flavor. There's a bit of subtlety, right? That's more subtle than these strong artificial flavors, in a bag of Cheetos. There's a bit more refined flavor, but you can get a taste for that. So we can get a taste for peace inside our own body. We can get a taste for peace inside our own mind. We can get a taste for the feeling of just being quiet and breathing. And we can also get a taste for dialogue. Like we can get more of an appreciation for coming together with people who have difficult, contradictory points of view, and just talking it through. Like, okay, what are the benefits? What are the disadvantages? And what are your experiences? Not even needing necessarily to come to a conclusion, but just if you're just able to be in dialogue with another person, it's a little bit like inviting even the idea in our head that we should exercise, or maybe we should exercise less and save the time. And just bringing those two ideas in to our own mind allows them to have some ongoing dialogue. And so it's, I just find it interesting that there is this similarity between what goes on in our own mind, what goes on in our own body, and then our interpersonal relationships. And this similarity between this way our eyes generate a sense of distance between ourselves and others, but the body doesn't really have a sense of distance. And when you're in dialogue, it really closes that gap between yourself and another person. And you think, actually, I can empathize with their situation. I know they're doing a hard job. I probably couldn't do as well doing their job. They're doing a really hard job. I need to listen to and understand and appreciate their point of view and the balance that they're trying to strike. And so closing the gap between ourselves and others, and beginning to think, change our thinking away from everything being distant to just everything coming together and being a bit, there is this, it's called duality, right? The sense of a gap. There's different versions of duality, right? But the sense of a gap between ourselves and others, gap between, past and future, and all these senses of gaps. It's an optical illusion just based on the way that we think. There's visual thinking more than being aware of our body. So that's a lot, of course, but I did want to just kind of tie back this idea of going from difficult conversations to having dialogue, and the idea of picking up that sometimes it's the things that are most boring that are most useful and most enjoyable once we get an acquired taste for them. So, all right, so that was what I wanted to share. But maybe we can take just a bit of time while that's sort of alive and fresh in our mind, just to think about our own situation and where it is that we're feeling a gap between ourselves and other people, for example, and thinking maybe that gap is not as big as we thought it was. Maybe there's maybe we're all basically in a similar situation. That might be a nice way to sort of tie this up, so we can meditate for a little bit now on that. And coming back to our body, so we can close our eyes for meditation. Again, find a comfortable position, and where you might have gotten caught up in my words, now we're bringing our attention back to our own body, becoming aware of this weak signal. Taking a deep breath in and out and just inviting ourselves to relax. And although we normally think about our body visually, the body that we can see, what is the body that we feel? What's that like? And try to notice how there's no sense of space. There's no sense of distance. If we forget the body that we see and we just focus on the body we can feel, there is no gap, there is no distance. We can bring to mind someone that we may tend to butt heads with or think of as where we have a tendency to get into a conflicting relationship. And we can just think, are they really so different from me? Is there really such a gap between myself and this person? Or are they also just trying to survive and thrive in their own similar world? tend to perceive a gap between ourselves and others, especially those we're in conflict with. We think in terms of gaps. But how much gap is there, really? And we can think, even in this short time, our mind has changed. We've engaged in beneficial activities, listening, contemplating, meditating. Every change leads to results. Every action leads to change. What would we imagine are the most beneficial results that could come from this brief time together? We just focus on that for a minute. And then we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation.